One day, after not meeting my parents for a while, I decided to take them to dinner at a nice restaurant. You know, it had been a hectic few months. Work, friends, life in general, it all got in the way, and somehow, I hadn't spent much quality time with my parents. So, I figured a nice evening out, with good food, a bit of wine, and easy conversation would do us all some good. Plus, there was something I had been curious about for the longest time. I had heard bits and pieces over the years, but never the full story of how my parents met and fell in love. So there we were, sitting at a table near a window with a view of the city skyline, the kind of place with soft lighting and quiet chatter in the background. My parents were already in their element, my mom eyeing the menu like she was on a mission, and my dad squinting, pretending to understand the wine list. It was a typical scene, really. And in that moment I thought, this is it. I'm going to ask them. I put down my glass, leaned in, and said, so, I know bits and pieces, but I don't think I've ever heard the full story of how you two met. How did it all begin? They exchanged a glance. That kind of glance only two people who have spent decades together can share, the one where words aren't necessary. My mom raised an eyebrow and smiled, as if the memory had just come rushing back. My dad, he just laughed, a little embarrassed, like he always did when talking about anything emotional. Well, my mom started, it was a long time ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. My mom chimed in. It was funny because I was running late, and I had this huge stack of files with me. I was so focused on getting back to work that I barely even noticed him sitting there by the window, staring out like he was deep in thought. Now, here's where it gets good. The moment that changed everything. As she rushed past him, completely frazzled and overwhelmed with files, she somehow managed to drop half of them. Papers scattered everywhere, on the floor, under chairs, you name it. And who was the only person around who could help? Yup, my dad. I saw it happen in slow motion, my dad said, still laughing at himself. I was so caught up in my own head that I didn't realize what was going on until your mom was practically on the floor, trying to pick everything up. So, naturally, I got up to help. And that's how it all began. I remember looking up at him, my mom said with a nostalgic smile, and thinking, well, at least he's cute. She paused for dramatic effect, glancing at my dad, who pretended to be outraged at the comment. He handed me the papers, and I thanked him. I didn't think much of it at first. But then he made this joke. Here's the thing about my dad. He's not the smoothest when it comes to flirting. He's awkward in the best possible way, and that day was no different. I don't even remember what I said, my dad admitted. But it must have been something incredibly cheesy because she laughed. Oh, it was cheesy, my mom confirmed. You said something like, I guess we're partners in crime now. She rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her. But you know what? It made me laugh. And I needed that day. I was so stressed out, and that little moment of laughter, it made me stop and breathe. After that, they bumped into each other at the coffee shop a few more times. It was never planned, always by chance. My mom would be grabbing a quick coffee between meetings, and my dad would just be there. And every time they saw each other, they'd chat a little more. We started talking about everything, my mom recalled. Books, music, life, things that didn't really matter but felt important at the time. And I remember thinking, this guy is different. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was just himself. Now, here's where it gets interesting. My dad, as casual as he seemed, was apparently quite nervous every time he saw her. He didn't know if she was interested or just being polite, and he didn't want to push his luck. But after a few weeks of these accidental coffee shop encounters, he took a leap of faith. I remember it so clearly, my dad said, leaning back in his chair, smiling at the memory. It was a rainy afternoon. We were both stuck inside the coffee shop because of the storm, and I thought, well, if I don't ask her now, I'll never know. So I asked her out. Simple as that. And my mom? She hesitated. Not because she didn't like him, but because she had just gotten out of a serious relationship and wasn't sure if she was ready for something new. But there was something about my dad, something genuine and unassuming, that made her say yes. Their first date wasn't anything fancy. No five-star restaurant, no grand gestures. Just a walk in the park and dinner at a little Italian place they found along the way. But that night, something clicked. "I think that's when I knew," my mom said softly, almost as if she was talking to herself. It wasn't anything specific that he said or did. It was just him. The way he made me feel comfortable, the way he listened, the way he made me laugh. It felt like I had known him forever. From that point on, they were inseparable. Of course, there were ups and downs, like any relationship. There were times when they argued, times when they weren't sure where things were headed. But through it all, they kept choosing each other. Falling in love wasn't this huge, dramatic thing, my dad explained. It was quiet and steady. It was in the little things. Like how your mom always knew how I took my coffee, or how she'd leave me notes in the most unexpected places. My mom added, and it was the way he never gave up on me. Even when things got tough, even when I was difficult to love, he stayed. He always stayed. As they finished their story, I sat there, amazed by how simple yet profound their love was. It wasn't flashy or filled with grand gestures. It was built on laughter, kindness, and an unshakable foundation of friendship. And that's what made it beautiful. So there you have it. The story of how my parents met and fell in love. It started with a spilled pile of papers and a cheesy joke in a coffee shop, but it grew into something so much more. Something real, something lasting. I looked at them, sitting across from me, still teasing each other, still finishing each other's sentences after all these years. And I couldn't help but smile. Because if that's what love looks like, messy, imperfect, and full of laughter, then maybe that's the kind of love we should all be looking for. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how two ordinary people created an extraordinary life together.